The entry and exit of cargo and vehicles from the Iran-Azerbaijan border into the country has been banned. The reason for this is clear. It was the targeting of civilian objects.
Cargo trucks and commercial vehicles can no longer enter or leave Iran through the Azerbaijan border. The decision came after Iranian drones reportedly struck civilian targets and injured civilians. In response, Azerbaijan moved quickly, sealing its border crossings and banning all cargo traffic traveling between the two countries. Most civilian crossings had already been restricted for years, but this latest move has effectively frozen one of Iran's most critical land routes to the outside world.
And the injury of civilians by Iranian drones.
Highways that once carried a constant flow of international trade have suddenly gone silent. The impact was immediate. Customs processing stopped almost overnight. At the Astara border crossing, thousands of trucks quickly began to pile up, forming massive queues stretching across highways. Drivers turned off their engines and waited, unsure when, or if, the border would reopen. Many of the trucks carry perishable goods. Food shipments, agricultural exports, and industrial materials now sit idle under the sun. Every hour that passes increases the risk that entire cargo loads will spoil, creating massive financial losses for drivers and companies alike. Truck drivers now face a painful dilemma. If deliveries are late, they risk heavy financial penalties, but with the border sealed, there is no way forward. More than 1,500 Russian trucks have reportedly been stranded at the Iranian border alone, creating tensions among international transport companies and drivers who are watching their cargo deteriorate. Protests have already begun among drivers stuck in the growing lines. What began as a border control decision is rapidly evolving into a major logistical crisis. The shutdown did not only affect the Astara crossing. Other critical transit points such as Bilasuvar and Julfa have also been hit, bringing cargo movement across the region almost completely to a halt. This sudden blockade has struck at the heart of one of the region's most important trade networks, the International North-South Transport Corridor. This corridor is a massive logistics project designed to connect India, Iran, Azerbaijan, Russia, and Europe through an integrated chain of roads, railways, and shipping routes. For years, billions of dollars were invested in turning Iran into a central transit hub, linking Asia and Europe. But a single decision from Baku has now disrupted that entire system. Iranian truck drivers are now trapped in a logistical dead end. The northern route through Azerbaijan had become one of the last viable corridors for large-scale trade. With that route closed, Iran's land connections are shrinking dramatically. Nearly 400 trucks used to cross this border every day. Iran also has roughly 400,000 truck drivers, forming one of the most critical pillars of its economic infrastructure. Now, many of them have suddenly lost the ability to work. The border shutdown is not simply a transportation problem. It is triggering a deeper economic shock. To understand why the situation feels so explosive today, many analysts are looking back at the events that unfolded over the past 2 years inside Iran. One of the most powerful warning signs emerged when Iranian truck drivers launched large protests and strikes. What began as complaints about fuel prices, transport costs, and wages quickly grew into something much larger. Drivers began parking their trucks across highways, blocking supply routes, and disrupting the movement of goods across the country. In some areas, entire highways were transformed into barricades made of parked trucks. The protest movement rapidly became one of the most serious economic disruptions the government had faced in years. Security forces attempted to suppress the protests, and clashes erupted in several cities. But instead of ending the movement, the crackdown only fueled anger and intensified the resistance. Truck drivers were no longer just demanding better wages. The strike had evolved into a powerful act of economic civil disobedience. Now, that internal tension is colliding with external geopolitical pressure. Iran already faces mounting challenges across several strategic routes. Maritime trade has been under pressure due to tensions in the Strait of Hormuz. Security concerns have complicated movement across parts of the eastern border, and now the northern corridor through Azerbaijan, the last major land bridge for many routes, has been sealed. The result is a geopolitical squeeze. Inside the country, hundreds of thousands of drivers are struggling with rising costs and shrinking opportunities. Outside the country, thousands of trucks sit stranded at closed borders. This dual pressure is hitting Iran's economy from both directions at once. Truck drivers are not just workers in the transport sector. They form the backbone of the entire industrial supply chain. When trucks stop moving, factories stop producing. Steel plants cannot receive raw materials. Agricultural shipments cannot reach markets. Petrochemical exports cannot leave industrial zones. Food distribution networks slow down across the country. The entire economic system begins to choke. Analysts warn that if the shutdown continues, the ripple effects could reach millions of workers whose jobs depend on those supply chains. Factories across northern Iran are already feeling the shock. One of the most vulnerable industrial hubs is Tabriz, a major manufacturing center deeply connected to the cross-border trucking network. Many industries there rely heavily on supplies and export routes passing through Azerbaijan. With the border closed, raw materials are no longer arriving. Finished products cannot be shipped out. Production lines are slowing down, shifts are being canceled, and some factories may soon face temporary shutdowns. For an industrial region where as much as 30 to 40% of economic activity depends on cross-border logistics, the disruption feels like a sudden heart attack to the system. Authorities have explored alternative routes, but geography makes those options extremely difficult. Transport through Armenia or Turkmenistan requires significantly longer distances, raising costs by 20 to 30% while slowing deliveries by days. Shipping across the Caspian Sea also lacks the capacity to handle the enormous cargo volumes that usually move through road networks. Every alternative route faces physical limitations. Meanwhile, the economic consequences are beginning to ripple through domestic markets. Supply chain disruptions are pushing up prices for food, fuel, and everyday goods. Inflation, already a serious challenge, is being pushed even higher by transportation bottlenecks and shortages. The impact is particularly severe for truck drivers themselves. Many drivers operate on extremely thin profit margins, often carrying loans on their vehicles while trying to cover rising fuel and maintenance costs. With trucks sitting idle, their income has suddenly collapsed. Unpaid loans, growing debts, and rising living expenses are pushing thousands of drivers to the edge of financial survival. For many of them, the crisis feels like an economic cliff. Large numbers of angry drivers stranded at the borders are not just victims of a transportation crisis. They represent a powerful social force that could ignite wider unrest. These are workers whose livelihoods have disappeared almost overnight. And many of them believe they are paying the price for political decisions far beyond their control. As trade routes close and supply chains fracture, frustration is building. The silence of thousands of parked trucks across highways is more than a logistical disruption. It is the sound of an economy slowing to a dangerous halt. With fewer trade routes available and mounting internal pressures, the country is facing an increasingly complex crisis. Border closures may appear administrative on paper, but on the ground they trigger massive economic shockwaves that spread far beyond customs checkpoints. Trade slows, factories struggle, drivers lose their income, markets face shortages. And in a system already strained by political tensions and economic hardship, the margin for stability grows thinner with every passing day. Iran's transportation arteries, stretching from south to north, are under severe pressure. And as the engines of trade fall silent, the question many observers are asking is simple. How long can an economy survive when its supply lines begin to collapse?